Hi, subscribe to Life Stories so you don't miss new stories. Today we present to you one of such stories, a story of love, betrayal, and redemption. In this story, you will meet a hero who faced incredible trials after his life was turned upside down. He went through fire and water to find answers and discover himself in a new world where nothing was as it once was. Get ready for an exciting journey where unexpected plot twists and important lessons about human destiny await you at every turn. Hi, I'm Jim Nettles and this is my story. I guess if you're happy, you ignore what's really going on around you. Then, unexpectedly, you discover your wife is cheating on you and your world turns dark. I thought my 18-year-old daughter and her friends were sneaking into the basement drinking my homemade beer. Instead, the camera I installed in the basement caught my wife with her boyfriend and they were drinking my beer. JT and I are members of a beer club here in Atlanta, and he discovered his wife of 25 years had been cheating on him for over 24 years. He told us his story at one of our beer club meetings. One thing he said I ignored was to take off your rose-colored glasses and examine your marriage. Karen and I have 3 children and have been married almost 28 years. Life was great. Karen is the only child of Ben and Alice Thompson. She came from a life of the rich and famous. Karen may be 49, but she could pass for 35. I'm not sure if I was raised middle class or not, but I was raised in a loving family. I grew up in a small town outside of Atlanta. I'm the younger of 2 boys. I grew up next door to my grandparents, and my father worked at my grandfather's hardware store. My brother Ken and I worked at the store after school and on weekends. Ken went to Georgia Tech and became an electrical engineer for a paper company in South Carolina. Following my big brother's lead, I went to Georgia Tech as a computer science major. Every small town has a rich kid, and Joey was ours. Joey and I have been best friends since we were 3. While I attended Georgia Tech, Joey attended Emory. I set Joey up with dates when he visited me, and he returned the favor when I visited him. Karen was one of my blind dates at Emory. She was the only blind date Joey set me up with who I called for a second date. As seniors, we spent as much time together as our schedules would allow. One thing I knew, I wanted to spend the rest of my life with this woman. However, there was one problem I needed to address before asking her to marry me. I was taught by my grandparents and parents to work hard and provide for my family. Karen came from money and never worked a day in her life. My pride wouldn't let me live off her parents. If she agreed to marry me, we'd be on our own without assistance from her parents. Thank God she agreed. When I was old enough to work, my dad insisted I save 10% of everything I made for my future. I did use part of my savings to buy Karen an engagement ring. The day after I asked Karen to marry me, we went and told her parents. Karen and her mother were excited and started planning the wedding. Karen's dad and I left them alone. We went into his study, and he asked me about my plans after graduation. I told him I'd accepted a job with a large corporation here in Atlanta. He seemed pleased we would be close by, and he knew the executives of that corporation. About 2 hours later, we said our goodbyes and left. Karen and her mother would have 14 months to plan the wedding, and I'd have a year to concentrate on my career. 3 months after we told Karen's parents our plans, Ben invited me into his study. He told me he liked me and knew Karen loved me, but as a father, he had to protect his daughter and family. I sat there wondering what the hell he was talking about. He handed me a document and said it was a prenuptial agreement he wanted me to sign. I could hear my father's voice, never sign anything without reading it, asking questions, seeking advice, and thinking it through before signing. He sat and waited for me to finish reading the agreement. The agreement stated that if our marriage failed, within the first 5 years, I'd receive $100,000 and wouldn't be entitled to any other assets from Karen or her family. Every 10 years, the money limits increased and capped at $5 million on our 25th wedding anniversary. I sat there looking at him with my mouth open, trying to decide how to respond. After a few minutes, I told him, "Sir, I love your daughter and plan to spend the rest of my life loving her. However, the business side of me understands where you're coming from. I'll take this with me and think about it." He said, "Good, I'll wait for your response." My father is always the first person I go to for advice, so I went to see him. Dad took his time reading it through twice before saying, Jim, we both know why Ben wants this agreement, and the way it's written, it only protects his family. My question is, what do you want out of this marriage, and what do you want to protect from them? We discussed my goals, feelings, dreams, and long-term future with Karen. Dad said, I've always operated on the belief that if you ask me to give up something, then you need to give up something as well. Ben's attorney is looking out for the Thompsons, which he's paid to do. He sees you as a country boy with nothing to lose and a lot to gain. You and I both understand why he wants this agreement. Ben believes you love Karen now, but he's worried about something happening later. If you or I were in his place, we'd be doing the same thing. He paused, then said, Jim, a marriage fails for several reasons. This prenuptial states any reason. Being together in college is one thing, and being a married working couple is something else. Can you and Karen work through the rough spots? You may discover you can't live together because of your jobs, your friends, your finances, your parents, or any other factors. Do you want Ben's money because your marriage didn't work out? What would end a marriage that would make you want his money? God, I'm glad I talked with Dad. I called my brother Ken and got his feedback, and it basically sounded like I was talking with my dad again. After talking with several other people I trusted, I knew the changes I would make to the prenuptial and how to discuss them with Ben. On our next visit to see Karen's parents, I asked Ben for a few minutes of his time. He looked at me and said, let's go into my study and give these ladies time to discuss the wedding. As we entered the study, I pulled out the prenuptial agreement that Ben had given me. Sir, I've given this a lot of thought, and I'd like to make a few changes, I said. He got ready to say something, paused, then nodded his head, telling me to continue. I understand and can appreciate your position. I'm marrying your daughter because I love her. So what I propose is, 1, in the first 10 years of the marriage, you deposit $100,000 into an investment account. He and I will determine together where the investment of these funds goes. We'll meet once a quarter to discuss this. I feel this will give us a chance to bond with each other. 2, if the marriage fails, then you keep the money, and Karen and I will split assets we acquired during our marriage, 50-50. This excludes assets we acquire from you or my parents. 3, if this marriage ends in divorce because I committed adultery, then you keep the money and Karen gets 100% of the assets we acquired during our marriage. This excludes assets we acquire from you or my parents. 4, if this marriage ends in divorce because Karen commits adultery, then I get the money and 100% of the assets we acquired during the marriage. Once again, this excludes assets we acquire from you or my parents. 5, Karen and I will get total control of the investment account on our 43rd wedding anniversary. I paused, giving him time to think. A smile crossed his face. He leaned back in his chair and said, Son, your offer is very interesting. It shows you love my daughter. Your proposal to jointly manage the investment fund is truly creative. I agree. This would give us something to do together, plus I stay in control for 43 years. What I don't understand is why you do not want to split anything in case of adultery. I have 2 questions. First, why 43 years, and please explain the adultery split. The answer to 43 years is easy. Karen and I will be 65 years old, and the money will be used for retirement. He laughed and nodded his head for me to continue. If the marriage fails because we try but can't work out our differences, then everything is even. We gave it all we had to make it work. Why punish the other person? Now, if either of us commits adultery, then that's something we are doing on purpose. And a marriage can't survive the betrayal and distrust left in its wake. Marriage is the joining of two to make one. Our mission is to be true to each other for the rest of our lives. If Karen is unhappy with me, she can ask for a divorce, then she can see anyone she wants to. I'll be true to Karen, and the only way for me to seek revenge is if she commits adultery while married to me. Does this answer your questions? Yes, son, you answered my questions. I'll have a new agreement drawn up. A new agreement has been drawn up for your review. Let's go join the ladies. A few weeks later, we brought Karen and explained the prenuptial agreement to her. Karen was surprised to find out this had been going on and had never considered it a possibility. After reading it, Karen looked up and asked, "Jim, are you okay with this?" "Yes, Karen," I responded. She took some time to reread the agreement, and then asked, "Jim, why 43 years? And what's this about adultery?" Laughing, I replied, "Your father asked me the same thing. In 43 years, we'll be 65 years old. Consider it our retirement fund." Karen sat there smiling. If we work at making our marriage work and fail, then we divorce and move on, knowing we tried. Adultery is done on purpose, going behind someone's back, lying about where you've been and who you were with. I can't conceive anything more devastating or dishonest to a marriage. If I'm not good enough for you or you feel the need for someone else, then ask me for a divorce. I will not be disrespected, nor will I be a fool. I love you and I will be true to you, and I ask the same from you. We had a great wedding and a fantastic honeymoon. We have been married for almost 28 years and have 3 children. Dan is our oldest at 26 and was named after my father. He is working for one of Ben's companies, where Ben is grooming him to take over the family businesses. He has been accepted into an MBA program starting this fall. Benny is 25, loves the outdoors, and joined my dad after graduating from college. As you can see, Benny is named after Karen's dad. My dad is very happy to have someone in the family take over the farm and hardware store. My brother and I left the farm as soon as we could. Amy, our surprise child, turned 18 3 months ago and has me wrapped around her little finger. She is the best athlete of our children and has accepted a full scholarship to play soccer at UNC next year. After the boys left for college, I converted the basement game room into a brew pub. Karen and I like to entertain, and the pub has become very popular with our family and friends. For a few months, I have suspected someone of stealing my beer. No, I do not take inventory. It is just a feeling. While packing a few beers for a beer club meeting, I could not find any bottles of IPA. Fred Jones was at the meeting that night, and I told him I thought my 18-year-old daughter was sneaking my beer from my pub. "Do you let your daughter drink beer?" "No, I let her have a taste if she wants to." "What makes you think it's her?" "The beer seems to disappear when I travel out of town, but it can't be Karen. I have never seen her drink a whole glass of my beer. She prefers wine. The boys like my beer when they visit. I send them home with a case of beer each. That leaves Amy and her friends. Well, I can install a motion-controlled surveillance camera in the pub, and you can catch her on tape." "What a great idea. Can you install the camera tomorrow?" "Will the camera be installed tomorrow morning while Amy is in school?" "Will 11 a.m. work?" "Thank you. I'll see you at 11 a.m. tomorrow." Frank arrived right on time and had everything installed within 15 minutes. He spent another 20 minutes teaching me how to operate it. "Are you going to tell Karen about the camera?" "No, she would probably slip and tell Amy about it." "So when is your next trip?" "I am going to Cleveland next week. I leave on Wednesday and return on Thursday." "Have a safe trip and let me know if you catch her on tape." We left the system turned on and went to lunch. For the next 2 weeks, every time I went into my pub, I drank a beer and checked the tape. The only people caught on tape were the cleaning crew that comes in on Tuesday and Friday mornings, and myself. I didn't get home from Cleveland until 1 a.m. on Friday morning due to a 2-hour flight delay. I spent Friday at the office. Friday night, Karen and I had dinner with her parents, and then attended a play. On Saturday, we had a barbecue at our house. On Sunday after church, we visited my parents. When we got home, I went to sleep in my easy chair. On Monday night, while Karen was at a meeting and Amy was at soccer practice, I checked the tape. 5 minutes into watching the tape, my world fell apart. I expected to see Amy and her friends, but instead, I saw Karen enter my pub holding hands with Gerald Jerome. His wife, Diana, and daughter moved into the neighborhood about 8 months ago. Jerome's daughter, Nicole, and Amy quickly became close friends. I went numb, seeing my wife bent over the arm of my favorite chair, getting intimate with Gerald. I don't know how long I sat there staring at the screen. It wasn't until I realized I was watching tape from Seti's barbecue that I snapped out of my daze. I wish I had installed audio recorders along with the camera. My shock turned into anger and then rage. Dan had always stressed working through problems with a clear head instead of letting anger control you. Do your homework, gather your facts, understand your problem, and then decide how to handle it. People make stupid decisions when they are angry. I needed hard facts. While the tape was rewinding, I took several deep breaths, trying to calm down and watch the tape again. It was obvious that this wasn't their first time. After she got him a beer, they sat there talking while the son of a drank my beer. Jerome was getting dressed, Karen got him another beer, and she dressed while he drank the beer. The son of a bitch ducked my wife, drank my beer, and took my bottles. I stopped the tape and called Frank. He answered on the third ring. Frank, it's Jim Nettles. Do you have a few minutes? Yes. Did you catch your daughter stealing your beer? No. I caught my wife with a neighbor, and I need your professional services. I'm sorry to hear that. What do you need? Everything. Can we get together sometime tomorrow? Hang on, let me get my data. How about 4 o'clock tomorrow? Great, I'll see you then. What do I need to bring? The tape, his name, address, phone number, work address, Karen's schedule, and when you'll be out of town again. See you at 4. Thank goodness Karen wasn't home yet, which gave me time to get control of my emotions. About an hour later, Amy came downstairs, letting me know she was home. We walked upstairs where she told me about her next soccer game. I assured her I'd be there. I'm not one to hide from problems, so I decided to stay up and wait for my cheating wife to get home. I still wonder if she was at a meeting that night, or if she was out getting drunk. Oh well, I thought, Frank will find out. At 3:55 I walked into Frank's office, ready for battle. He told me he was sorry to hear about Karen cheating on me. I said, I've talked with JT and he told me how you and Mike Ford handled his case. You're the expert. What do you recommend? I know about the prenuptial agreement and you have all the evidence you need to prove adultery. What do you want? I know, but I want to know everything about Jerome, his past, his wife, and his family. I want him followed 24/7. I want to know what he does, who he sees, how he makes money, and what he values most in his life. The son of a bitch will pay for ruining my life. Not only do I want him followed, but I want Karen followed 24/7 as well. That will take time and manpower to gather all the information you want. I'll get my staff started on this first thing in the morning. I recommend we install cameras and recorders in all rooms of your house as well as Karen's car. Good idea. I wish we had audio from last week. So, when's your next trip? 3 weeks from today. I'll be out for 4 days this time. Great, we should have enough information for you by then. Did you bring the tape? Yes, I brought what you asked me to bring. When can we get into your house to install the new system? Karen plays bridge on Thursday mornings. How long do you need? We'll need at least 2 hours. Okay, I'll meet you at my house on Thursday at 9:30. When I left Frank's office, I felt better, just knowing something was being done. Now all I had to do was wait. 3 weeks later, I kissed my wife goodbye for the last time and left for Austin, Texas. The past 3 weeks felt like 3 years. Mike Ford had all the legal paperwork ready, and I had it in my briefcase. I would be the one serving Karen with the divorce papers. I went to JT's instead of going to Austin, knowing that my marriage would be over tomorrow. As expected, Frank came by with the news I'd been expecting. The bitch came over 45 minutes after I left and they had sex twice in our bed. Karen asked him if he could spend tomorrow night with her, since Amy was spending the night with a friend. After many hours of deliberation, I finally decided how to handle Karen's exposure. What I really wanted to do was throw them both out of my house, without clothes, into the street. The next afternoon, I called Karen's father and asked him to meet me at his office. I told him I had a problem and I needed his guidance, and wanted to discuss it in private. He agreed to meet me at 6:30 that evening. Ben met me at the door with questioning eyes. I've never asked to see him at his office, so he knew something was up. Sir, I've always viewed you as another father, and I'm glad I've gotten to know you over the past 29 years. Because I respect you and consider you my father, I've decided to treat you with the same respect I would my own father. In this situation, Jim, what are you talking about? Well, sir, Tonight, I'm serving Karen with divorce papers on grounds of adultery. What in heaven's name is going on? I have tapes of Karen and her lover having sex in our bed. In fact, your daughter and her boyfriend are currently having sex in our marital bed as we speak. This can't be happening. What are you going to do? Well, sir, I've looked at this several ways. What I want to do is go over there and throw them out of my house. You can't be serious. Yes, I'd love to do that if I didn't respect you. That's exactly what I'd do. However, I have another option I want to discuss with you. For the next 45 minutes, we discussed my plan, and he agreed it was the best way to handle it. At 9:15, Ben and I met Frank Jones, Brad Williams, Mike Ford, and Steve Collins, an Atlanta police detective at my house. I introduced everyone, and Frank informed us they were in the master bedroom. We were on the front porch talking when Frank heard in his earpiece that they were hiding. I unlocked the front door, leading everyone into the living room. Looking at Ben, I said, "I'm sure you don't want to see your daughter having sex. Why don't you wait downstairs?" Once again, I promised him I wouldn't physically hurt Karen. Brad followed us up the stairs, carrying a video camera. We wanted to record them before we entered, and we wanted them to know they were being recorded. Our plan was to stand outside the door and wait until Jerome was ready to go in. As we walked down the hall toward the bedroom, we could hear the sounds of their lovemaking. Those were the sounds of making love, not just having sex. We got ready to enter. Karen sat there with the sheet pulled up to her neck, and Jerome was trying to cover himself with a pillow. Jerome, I'd like to introduce you to these fine people. First, this is Frank Jones, an investigator. Standing beside him is Mike Ford, my divorce attorney. And next, meet Steve Collins, an Atlanta police detective. Brad is operating the camera. I'd like nothing more than to throw you both out of my house. But I have other plans for you. In case you're wondering, the entire house is recording everything, and has been for the past 3 weeks. Karen, I know Jerome is an old boyfriend of yours, and over the past 3 weeks, I've learned that he wanted to marry you. Everyone in this room knows that you married me because your parents wouldn't have approved of this. As Hull and I both know, you married me so you give your parents, grandchildren, and secure your family line for another generation. Good news, they now have 3 heirs. Jim, please be quiet. I don't care what you have to say. Not now and not in the future. There's absolutely nothing you can say that changes the fact that you're in our bed with another man. You can't expect me to believe this is a mistake. I have you on tape inviting this man to spend the night with you. After he slept with you twice in our bed yesterday, 2 hours after I left town. Save your breath. I don't believe a word you say. Looking at Gerald, I said, I must say, you are truly a player. For the past 3 weeks, you have been under surveillance, and we have gathered every piece of information we could. Upon Frank's team putting together a very detailed report on your activities, I turned to Frank and asked him to play the DVD for Jerome and Karen. Karen, pay close attention. I want you to see your lover for who and what he truly is. The video showed scenes of Jerome playing Karen, as well as 2 other women. But the most shocking part was a scene of Jerome and his friends at a restaurant last week. They were sitting around a table when someone asked, "Jerome, do you still sleep with married women?" Jerome replied, "Hell yes, I can't get enough of them. There's nothing better than sleeping with them in their husband's bed." When asked if he had hooked up with anyone since moving back to Atlanta, Jerome boasted, "Oh yeah, I've got 3 married women now. And guess what? You know one of them. Remember Karen Thompson from college?" When reminded that Karen had come to their apartment on her wedding day for Jerome to sleep with her, he proudly admitted, "Yes, that's her. I've been sleeping with her for 5 months now. Can you believe it? She's my neighbor." When asked about Karen's previous promise to be faithful to her husband, Jerome callously replied, "She kept her word until 5 months ago. Now she's telling me she wished she had married me instead. Can you believe she actually thinks I would have married her?" By this time, Jerome was yelling at me and Karen was curled up in the fetal position. Frank and Steve moved over beside Jerome and told him to be quiet. Frank said, "Jerome, we're almost finished here. Just calm down and listen. We're not gonna hurt you unless we have to. Trust me." But you should know that your brothers-in-law have other plans for you. Your wife and her brothers were not happy when we shared our information with them. Turning to Jerome, I said, "Why don't you get dressed? Your ride should be here by now." Before he left, I handed him a stack of papers and said, "These are divorce papers your wife asked me to give you. And just so you know, she also asked me to tell you to go to hell and not come home." Jerome was shocked and angry, but I continued. "Her brothers have volunteered to pick you up tonight, and they're waiting for you downstairs. I must warn you, they are not happy about having to wait for us to finish our conversation." As Jerome stormed out, I added, "Oh, and don't forget to tell him about all the help her brothers gave us in gathering information about you. The documentation we gave your wife goes back at least 15 years. With the help of her brothers, she has documented 12 cases of adultery. You should hurry. They are downstairs waiting for you." Steve grabbed Jerome and escorted him out the door. I then turned to look at my lying, cheating wife. "So, how does it feel knowing the love of your life was playing you for a fool? How does it feel knowing you were played and not loved? How does it feel to find out you were just another pawn to Jerome? How does it feel to know you were his pawn 30 years ago? How does it feel to know he didn't love you? How does it feel knowing you were not the only one he was playing? How does it feel knowing you're still his pawn today? How does it feel knowing you've destroyed our family?" Letting my words sink in and taking a moment to collect my thoughts, I continued. "I told you 30 years ago, the worst thing you could do to our marriage was to cheat on me. It's bad enough to destroy our marriage, but to destroy our family for a man like Jerome is inexcusable. From today forward, you've ruined every holiday, every birthday, every graduation, every wedding, and every special family event. From now on, you've lost the respect of your children, your parents, my parents, and our friends, because you're just the sight of you makes me sick. I can't believe I've wasted 30 years of my life loving someone like you." She just lay on the bed, crying with her head under the covers. "You're not worth wasting any more time on. Get your cheating ass up and get dressed. Your father is waiting for you downstairs. He's agreed to take you home. And I can tell you he's not looking forward to telling Alice. I don't have anything else I care to say to you. You have 5 minutes to get dressed in the clothes you had on when you let your true love in tonight." "Jim, I can't let my father see me dressed like that." "That's your only choice unless you want me to drag you downstairs. Don't worry, your father knows you're Now get your sorry ass up and get dressed. You've got 4 minutes left. Please, Jim, I'm begging you, let me wear something else." "No, the clock is ticking. Get a move on. I can't get dressed with everyone watching. Please, Jim. These men have seen video of you with your true love. Get dressed now." To say Karen was dressed like a fallen woman is an understatement. She was wearing a see-through blouse, a very short leather skirt, and 4-inch heels. When I escorted her downstairs, Ben looked at her, then turned and said, "Oh my God, Jim, I can't take her home like this. Her mother will have a stroke, and I'm not sure I'm able to drive us after seeing her like this." Talk about a tough situation. On one hand, I wanted her to leave dressed like this, and on the other hand, I wanted to show my respect for Ben and Alice. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the grandfather clock while everyone waited for my answer. "Then I understand your problem, Steve. Will you drive them home in Ben's car if I follow you?" "No problem. Karen, because I love and respect your parents, I'll give you 10 minutes to go upstairs and change." Upstairs and change. The clock starts now. She ran upstairs with a thank you. When she returned, she was dressed like a soccer mom. I walked over to her and removed her engagement and wedding rings, telling her she didn't deserve them. When she went for her purse, I told her to leave it. She would leave with only the clothes she had on. Ben walked over, shook my hand, and said, "Thank you for letting her change. I'll take it from here." The hardest task I've ever had to do was telling the children about their mother's affair, seeing the pain in their eyes, answering their questions, and watching them deal with their mother's affair was painful. When Karen cheated on me, she also cheated our children out of a family. My parents' reaction was a mirror image of my children's. Epilogue: Amy turned down her soccer scholarship from North Carolina and joined the Emory soccer team so she could be close to her daddy. Our compromise was she could attend Emory, but she had to live on campus with her teammates. She helped me remodel the master bedroom and buy new furniture for my pub. When she's not home, I sleep in the guest room. Dan and Benny stop by and check on me more often than before. One of the things I enjoy the most is they take turns going with me to my beer club meetings. Benny has taken on the challenge of growing some hops for the beer club. We're gonna have a contest to see who brews the best beer using Benny's hops. I know Amy keeps tabs on me and makes sure her brothers stay in contact with me. Based on advice from the attorneys, Karen and I settled for a no-fault divorce. Ben agreed that I had proof of Karen's adultery and didn't need to seek a divorce, charging her with adultery to gain control of the investment fund as per the prenuptial agreement. Then Alice and Karen were spared the embarrassment of a public trial. I did allow Ben and Alice to go through Karen's things and take her personal property. 2 months later, I got a phone call from Karen's dad, wanting me to meet him at his office. He and I talk often on the phone, so I was surprised when he requested a formal meeting. For the past 25 years, Ben has been after me to join him in the family business. I've always refused, saying I'd earn my own way and would never be accused of riding his coattails. He surprised me by starting down the path of me joining him. I raised my hand and told him to stop right there. I was not joining his company. Jim, I understand and respect the reason you never accepted my offer in the past, but this time it's different. I'm almost 76 years old, and Dan is at least 15 years away from being able to take over. I've always believed that if something happened to me, you would step in and take over. This episode with Karen almost destroyed Alice, and she needs me. Alice is so embarrassed she can't see her friends. All she does is stay in the house. Her counselor recommends taking her away for a while. Jim, I need you to replace me and groom Dan for the future. Then I'm so sorry to hear about Alice. Please give her my love, sir. I'm not prepared to give you an answer tonight. Give me a few days to think about this. Don't take too long. I need to get Alice and Karen out of Atlanta as soon as possible. When can you give me an answer? I'll meet you here in 3 days with my answer. Great. Tell your parents I said hello. I know you always talk with your father before you make a decision like this. See you in 3 days. 3 days later, I told Ben I'd accept his offer. Dan is excited about his role as caretaker of the family business, and Ben is correct. He is years away from taking over. Once a month, Ben and I meet with Dan, Benny, and Amy to discuss family business. This way, Ben knows what's going on and Dan has a support structure he can turn to for advice, just like I turn to my dad and brother. Karen moved to Florida with her parents and stays in contact with the children. Dan and Benny travel to Florida to see Karen several times a year, and Amy stays with her for a couple of weeks each summer. Karen attends several of Amy's soccer games and she stays away from me. Alice is making progress but will never move back to Atlanta. I'm not sure what happened to Gerald. His wife divorced him and last I heard, he moved somewhere out west. He was named in at least 8 divorce cases and is now flat broke. Jerome not only destroyed his life, but he also destroyed a lot of marriages. I guess I shouldn't blame everything on him. All of those women chose to cheat on their husbands. They were not drunk, they planned their duck sessions in advance, and they are just as guilty as Gerald. Hopefully, I'll find someone to love in the future. I miss being married and having someone to hold, someone to talk with, and someone to share my love with. Until that happens, I'll get up each morning, thank God for my children, and live my life looking forward instead of looking back. This story of love and betrayal truly captivates attention with its intriguing plotline and deep emotional twists and turns. It sheds light on the complex aspects of human relationships and allows the reader to reflect on important questions about their own life. The characters in this story overcome obstacles and find strength within themselves to embrace new challenges. Overall, it's a captivating journey through the dark corners of the human soul, leaving unforgettable impressions and wise lessons. Story 2. My wife and I met in Savannah, where we both attended college in very different fields. She was studying script writing and I was studying archaeology. Our first date went well enough that we continued seeing each other, And the more we did, the more we realized just how perfect we were for each other. She was a little geeky, very feminine, and very good at communicating. When we first started dating, we went out together weekly for trivia night at our favorite place and saw each other any chance we got during the week. Before her third year of school started, she moved in with her mom to save money because living on campus wasn't the best financial decision. From the first time I met her mom over dinner, she loved me, as did her sister and nieces. They all accepted me as if I was always part of the family. I had a job lined up as an archaeologist as soon as I graduated. My wife had a little trouble finding a job with her degree, so she started writing scripts to submit to several streaming services and channel networks. None of those panned out. Meanwhile, I proposed and we moved into the house I bought, regardless of her income. I knew I wanted to marry her as my wife. She continued writing for about a year, but after that she caved in and got a job as a receptionist at a nonprofit organization. I told her she didn't have to work a job she didn't like, but she promised she wanted to do it because sitting at home wasn't cutting it for her. That job lasted a total of 15 months before she quit and started her own home business. She started offering tarot card readings and selling little trinkets she made out of epoxy. Every Saturday, she went to the market with a cart full of her art projects to set up at a table she decorated to look pretty, inviting, and mysterious. I was surprised at how much money she managed to pull in from doing this. As an archaeologist, I had to travel for work. I would be home for about 2 weeks at a time, then leave for up to 6 weeks at a time. That was the longest it ever was, which I didn't think was that bad. Sure, I missed the intimacy with my wife, but that's what makes marriage so sacred. You wait and remain loyal to your spouse no matter what life throws at you. And when you reunite, it's the most rewarding relationship experience. I returned from a 6-week trip at one point, and after we had wonderful reunion sex, it seemed like something was bothering my wife. It was like she wanted to say something to me, but wasn't sure how I'd take it. As we sat watching a movie, she cloned her phone and I could feel her heartbeat racing. I finally paused it and confronted her, saying it was obvious something was on her mind. She swallowed hard and started to cry. She admitted she'd met someone at the market that she really enjoyed talking to. She said she wanted to consider being a life coach to this person, but she wasn't sure how I'd feel about her talking to him every day. I asked her if I could read what they had said to each other so far, so she gave me her phone. After scrolling up on the messages, there wasn't much that screamed infidelity to me. She simply asked him how he was handling the move, and reminded him that while having to relocate your family is a huge pain and life obstacle, it isn't the end of the world, and he didn't have to feel trapped. We all have the free will to do whatever we feel like, up to and including buying a plane ticket out of the country and never looking back. I told her it was fine for her to coach people and have friends. I just wanted to know the first names of the people she talked to and made it clear that I trusted her not to start an affair or behave inappropriately with anyone. She accepted my terms, but I did notice a little disappointment in her. It wasn't enough for me to say anything, and she would have denied it. Half a year passed without any incidents or trouble in our relationship. While I was away working in Tennessee, my wife called me one evening as I lay in my hotel bed. She was crying, saying she needed to ask me a question that had been on her mind for some time. I told her to ask away, and that I wouldn't be mad at her just for asking the question. She asked me if I wanted to sleep with other women whenever I went on a work trip. I told her no, absolutely not. I never felt the need to sleep with a woman I didn't love or commit my life to. I would wait as long as it took to sleep with her because she was my everything. She was surprised but seemed comforted. She told me if I ever didn't want to, I could tell her, and she wouldn't be mad. I told her she didn't need to worry about it because it never crossed my mind. I reminded her that when I chose to get married, I made her my one and only for the rest of my life, just as I would be an archaeologist for the rest of my life. I told her I never wanted anything to come between us and that sleeping with other people was just a recipe for disaster that could lead to jealousy problems and divorce. She agreed with me and seemed to feel much better. She told me she loved me with all her heart and wanted to be my good, loyal wife for life. With that, we said goodnight. The next morning is when my gut started twisting and turning. I didn't know what was going on at first. I honestly considered food poisoning as a possibility. But after giving it a moment's thought, I realized I couldn't trust my wife. She never asked me if she could sleep with someone else. But she kind of went around that question by asking me if I wanted to. I decided to go home early, even though my request was denied. I was risking my job to drive back home before my scheduled departure. After hours of worry and driving, I arrived home to find my wife's car in the driveway and no suspicious activity. I was relieved, but that feeling was short-lived. As soon as I unlocked the front door, I heard sounds coming from our bedroom. I raced to it to find my wife having sex with another man. When she saw me standing in the doorway, she screamed. I yelled for him to get out of my house, which he did after quickly gathering his clothes. I just stared at my wife in disbelief for a few seconds before reminding her that I had just told her how much I didn't want either of us to sleep with other people, and how detrimental it would be to our relationship. She just whined and asked me what she was supposed to do when most of her life was spent waiting for me to love her, instead of actively loving her. I told her she should do what any normal person would do when they don't have access to a lover, not meet some stranger and decide to take him to our marital home to have sex while I was out working. I told her this went against everything marriage stood for and that her fantasy of an open relationship would not happen with me. I demanded a wife in every sense of the word. She was on her knees, crying her eyes out, begging me with cupped hands to forgive her. She blamed herself for talking to other women about her situation and listening to them when they told her to do whatever she felt was right. I was beside myself. I couldn't believe that even though I had been clear about my feelings on an open relationship, she still went and talked to other women who encouraged her to give in to temptation and betray her vows. She cheated on me, she kept me in the dark, and I still caught her sleeping with him. I told her to get out. She told me she didn't know where to go. I told her I didn't care. I knew she had family and friends who wouldn't let her spend a night outside, so I told her to go to one of their houses. She refused to move. All she did was sit in the hallway making all kinds of remorseful noises. Whenever she thought of something specific, she'd start sobbing all over again. I ignored her as best I could, locking myself in the spare room. As annoying as it was, I was forced to stand my ground and share the house with her until she was ordered to vacate by the court when our divorce was final. While we lived separately under the same roof, I posted daily on social media about what she had done, tagging all her profiles and business accounts. I commented on the pictures of her tarot table setup, making smart remarks that questioned her ability to even see her own future downfall. This definitely impacted her reputation. A lot of potential customers took one look at her social media accounts and found at least one of my comments. It was enough that she lost all motivation to continue. She didn't even try to get a job in her field of study again. My testimony along with the phone records I requested were enough to avoid alimony payments. So, without any prospects or motivation, my divorced ex moved back in with her mother, sister, and nieces. She was essentially back to where she was in high school, except much older and sadder. This story illustrates the destructive impact of distrust and infidelity in marriage. Infidelity is a profound breach of trust and consent that can lead to serious consequences for all parties involved, including emotional and psychological trauma. While it is understandable to feel hurt and angry, I disagree with the main character's decision to publicly destroy his ex-wife's reputation. Public humiliation and insults can worsen the suffering for both parties and create additional obstacles to the healing process. It is important to find healthy ways to cope with such difficulties, including seeking support from friends, family, or professionals. Forgiveness can be a long and complex process, but focusing on one's own emotional well-being and rebuilding trust in the future is crucial for positive development.